Welcome, brave listener, to our ever-growing circle of midnight voyagers. Settle in, but heed this. Comfort is fleeting here. Each tale is crafted to haunt long after shadows fade. Let the darkness unfold. We'll wander together through whispers of dread and realms where terror wears a familiar face. Story 1. The wind carried the scent of wet earth through the cracked window. As Eleanor Voss dragged her fingertips across the mantelpiece, her father's study hadn't been touched in 17 years. Dust motes swirled in the jaundiced light, filtering through moth-eaten curtains, settling on the typewriter that still held a half-typed page. The ground here is wrong, Eleanor. It breathes. She'd only come to Blackwick House to sell it. The realtor's description. A charming 19th century farmhouse nestled in the Allegheny foothills had omitted the way the floorboards groaned like wounded things, or how the shadows in the hallway seemed to congeal into shapes that lingered just beyond recognition. The forest pressed close here, pines towering like sentinels with bark blackened by some long-ago fire. Their needles whispered even when the air was still. The first night, Eleanor dreamt of roots, thick, fibrous tendrils burrowing under her nails, through veins, wrapping around her ribs. She woke gasping, her bedroom frigid despite the July heat. The digital clock flashed 3:33 am. Something scratched at the walls. A dry, insistent sound, like bone on plaster. When she pressed her ear to the cold surface, a wet, guttural exhale seeped through the wood. Raccoons, she told the empty house, voice trembling. By dawn, the scratching had stopped, but the kitchen's sink spat brown water that stank of loam and iron. And when she tried to leave, the gravel driveway coiled into a perfect spiral, each loop tighter than the last, as if the land itself had nodded to keep her there. Her tires left deep grooves in the mud as she fishtailed back to the house. The second day, she found the photographs. They were tucked inside a warped cedar chest in the attic, their edges curled and speckled with mold. Black and white snapshots of her great-grandfather standing knee-deep in the woods, face gaunt, holding a shovel beside a pit, brimming with wet, glistening stones. Later ones showed her father as a young man, grinning beside the same pit, now lined with concrete, a crude symbol carved into its floor. 3 concentric circles bisected by a jagged line. In the final photo, his smile was gone. He stared at the camera, hollow-eyed, a hand pressed to his chest where the skin bulged unnaturally, as though something squirmed beneath it. The pit, she discovered that afternoon, was real. It lay half a mile into the woods, concealed by brambles that tore at her sleeves as she pushed through. 20 feet wide, its concrete walls webbed with cracks. Rainwater pooled at the bottom, reflecting the overcast sky like a dull coin. But as she leaned closer, the water rippled, not from the wind, but from beneath, as if something had stirred in the dark. "Don't," Eleanor jerked back. A man stood at the tree line, his face obscured by a faded baseball cap. He held a rusted machete loose at his side. "That's not a well," he said. His voice was gravel, wrapped in burlap. "It's a throat." He wouldn't come closer. Told her his name was Harlan, that his family had been keeping watch. Since the night in 48, when the ground split open and the Withers boy fell in. They pulled him out 3 days later, he said, eyes darting to the pit, still breathing, still screaming, but his insides gone. Like something ate him through the pores, Eleanor laughed. It echoed too sharply. "That's impossible." Harlan's gaze settled on her throat. "Your daddy never told you what's under this land, did he? The old ones. The ones that were here before the rocks." He spat. "They're hungry again that night. The power went out." Eleanor huddled by the fireplace. Her father's journals spread around her, page after page of frantic scrawl. "The well isn't deep enough. It's growing. The roots are in the walls now." A sketch of a human figure, limbs distended, mouth a gaping hole. Beneath it, "It wants a home." The fire popped. Shadows leapt. Something thumped in the cellar. She told herself it was the furnace. But the sound came again. A wet, meaty slap. Then another, and another. Rhythmic, relentless. The cellar door was colder than ice. Her breath plumed as she descended, flashlight beam shaking. The concrete floor gleamed. Slick, wet, footprints. They began at the base of the stairs. Bare feet, small, a child's, and led to the far wall. There the stone was split by a fissure, no wider than a finger. A viscous black fluid seeped from it, pooling around a cluster of teeth, human molars, still streaked with pink. Eleanor vomited. When she looked up, the fissure had widened. Inside, something glistened, pulsing, breathing. She ran. Upstairs, the walls hummed. The floor undulated beneath her. Boards warping into wave-like ridges. A portrait of her grandfather crashed down, glass shattering. His painted eyes followed her as she fled to the study. The typewriter keys began to clatter. Not random strikes. Words. "Eleanor, Eleanor, Eleanor." The carriage returned dinged. "Let me in the house" shuddered. Plaster rained down as the walls bulged inward. Fibrous black tendrils snaking through cracks. They throbbed like veins. Eleanor stumbled to her car. The engine roared to life. She hit the gas, tires screaming, and slammed into a wall of pines. They hadn't been there before. The trees pressed bumper to bumper. Trunks fused together in a solid mass. She reversed, tried another path, another wall, another. The forest had become a labyrinth, every road choked off. In the rearview mirror, Blackwick House loomed. The roof sagged. The windows pulsed. It wasn't a house anymore. She hid in the tool shed, knees pulled to her chest. The journals said the old ones needed a vessel, something with the blood. Her blood. Midnight. The shed door creaked open. Harlan stood silhouetted against the moonless sky. They're coming behind him. The earth rippled. Not earth. A wave. Of roots, of beetles, of things with too many legs, rolling toward them. The air filled with a sound, like 1,000 teeth grinding. The well. Harlan grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the pit. It's the only way to. A root lashed his throat. Blood sprayed. He crumpled. Eleanor ran. The pit yawned before her, its concrete throat vibrating with a low, hungry drone. The black water churned. Shapes writhed beneath the surface. Sinew and bone and eyes that reflected nothing. Hands seized her ankles. Not hands. Roots. They dragged her backward. Through mud. Through brambles. Up the porch steps. The front door swung open, hinges screaming. Inside, the walls had turned fleshy and warm. The ceiling dripped. A chandelier of vertebrae clattered above the staircase, where a figure waited. Her father, or what was left of him. His skin hung in tatters, revealing muscle slick with black fluid. His jaw unhinged, too wide, too many teeth. From his chest bloomed a nest of roots, each tip capped with a human tooth. You shouldn't have opened the journals, he rasped. The roots surged. They filled her mouth, her nose, her veins. She felt it then, the ancient, gnawing void beneath the house. Not evil, not malice, something worse, indifference, a hunger older than time, patient as stone, that had waited centuries to wear her skin. When the sheriff came next morning, he found the house spotless. No dust, no rot. Eleanor Voss sipped coffee at the kitchen island, smiling. False alarm, she said. Her voice buzzed faintly, like flies in a jar. Just needed to air the place out. As the cruiser disappeared down the driveway, she walked to the pit. The water had receded, revealing a spiral of teeth set into the concrete. Eleanor, or what wore her face, placed a hand over the symbol. The ground sighed. Somewhere deep below, something vast and terrible shifted in its sleep and dreamed of waking. Story 3. The hollowing, the first thing Clara noticed about the old Hargrave house, was the smell of wet earth, not the clean mineral scent of fresh-turned soil, but something older, damp, and cloying. like the breath of a long-sealed tomb. It clung to her clothes as she dragged the last suitcase across the threshold. A physical weight pressing against her sternum. The realtor had called it character. A rare opportunity, he'd said, to restore a piece of Willow's ends history. He hadn't mentioned the way the floorboards groaned, as if something beneath them were stirring, or how the shadows in the corners of the rooms seemed thicker than they ought to be. Clara had needed the escape. 3 months since the divorce, 2 since the miscarriage, and the cramped Brooklyn apartment with its thin walls and David's lingering cologne in the hallway closet had become unbearable. The inheritance of her great-aunt's crumbling Victorian in this forgotten Vermont town felt like fate throwing her a rope. She'd pictured peeling wallpaper and stubborn plumbing, not the way the attic window would rattle at night in windless silence, or the faint, rhythmic knocking inside the walls, like knuckles brushing against plaster, testing its strength. The townsfolk watched her. She felt their stares at the general store when she bought paint thinner and granola bars, their eyes lingering a beat too long on her still flat stomach. Old Mrs. Driscoll, who ran the antique shop, pressed a tarnished St. Benedict medal into her palm. For protection, she'd muttered, her knotted fingers cold as driftwood, when Clara tried to laugh it off. The woman's milky eyes sharpened. You hear it singing yet. Don't answer. Never answer that night. Clara dreamt of roots, thick black tendrils pulsing like veins, spreading beneath the house, through the foundation, into the cellar where the previous owners had stacked jars of preserves, now swollen and burst, their contents rotted to a viscous syrup. The roots twitched. Something glistened in their cores. Flecks of quartz. No. Teeth. Human teeth. Tiny and milk-white. Threaded through the fibrous dark. She woke gagging, her mouth full of the taste of loam. The manifestations began in earnest the next day. A handprint on the bathroom mirror, small enough to belong to a child, except the fingers were too long. The palm oddly tapered. It appeared while Clara scrubbed mildew from the clawfoot tub, the glass fogging not with steam, but with a cold, greasy film. When she wiped it away, the print remained, etched into the surface like acid. That afternoon, she found the cellar door ajar, though she'd padlocked it herself. From the darkness below came a wet, rhythmic sound. A dog lapping water, maybe, though Clara owned no pets. She slammed the door so hard the hinge splintered. By the 3rd week, the house began changing. Clara would enter a room and find the furniture rearranged. Armchairs pushed into tight circles, dining chairs stacked like kindling against the hearth. Once she woke to find every drawer in the kitchen yanked open, cutlery embedded in the ceiling, handles trembling as if freshly thrown. The air grew colder, denser, until breathing felt like swallowing like water, and always the smell, that ancient, fecund rot, seeping up through the floorboards, pooling in every corner. The worst was the whispering. It started as a vibration in her molars, a subaudible hum that made her gums ache, then words, or something like them, guttural, slithering sounds that seemed to coil around her spine. They came from the walls, the floor, the mottled stain spreading across the parlor ceiling like a fungal bloom. Clara began wearing noise-canceling headphones, but the voice slithered through anyway, urgent and hungry. It spoke in a language of wet stones and cracking ice. Yet somehow she understood. Hungry, it crooned. So long since we fed. She found the first journal buried in a rusted strongbox beneath the cellar stairs. The pages were brittle. The ink faded to ghostly blue, but her great-aunt's spidery handwriting was unmistakable. October 12th, 1947. They say it was here before the glaciers, before the first tribes. The men who built this house found its bones in the bedrock, ribs the size of oak trees, a skull like a buried chapel. Foolish, arrogant fools. They took the teeth as trophies, sold them to museums and collectors. They didn't understand you. Don't steal from a god. November 1st, it's growing stronger. The dreams won't stop. Last night, I saw it properly for the first time. Not bones, but what lies between them. A shimmer in the air like heat haze. But cold, so cold. It has too many eyes, too many mouths. It's been tasting me. I can feel its tongue in my thoughts, licking at my memories of Mother, of Henry. November 29th, it wants a womb, a vessel. I hear it in the walls, under the bed, inside my own pulse. It says there are veins beneath this house that lead to its heart, and its heart is so very empty. I won't let it take another. I've bought arsenic from the chemist. If I'm quick, maybe the entry ended there. Clara's hands shook. She barely noticed the cold until her breath plumed in front of her. White and thick, the cellar walls breathed. A subtle expansion and contraction. The stones grinding like molars. Something moved in the periphery of her vision. A suggestion of elongated limbs and jointless fingers. Here, then gone. The voice surged. No longer a whisper, but a chorus. Layered and dissonant. You'll do nicely. She ran. Up the cellar stairs. Through the kitchen. Out into the twilit yard, where the oaks clawed at a bleeding sky. Her jeep sat where she'd parked it. Keys dangling from the ignition, but the engine only coughed. Dead as the flies layered beneath the porch eaves. The radio spat static, and beneath it, that voice, softer now, amused. Little rabbit, The den is the teeth. The road out of Willow's End stretched empty for miles. Clara ran until her lungs burned. Past the crooked signpost, past the cemetery, where her great-aunt's headstone listed like a rotten tooth. The trees pressed closer, their branches knitting overhead into a tunnel. She stumbled, fell, and when she looked up, the house loomed ahead, its windows glowing with a sickly greenish light. The front door gaped open. Inside, something shuffled wetly across the ceiling. It was waiting in the parlor. Not a ghost, not a monster, but a wrongness. A distortion in the air like the wake of something submerged, bending light and shadow into impossible angles. Clara's eyes watered trying to parse it. A flicker of scales here, a cluster of eyes there, all swimming in and out of focus. The cold was absolute now, syrupy, filling her nose and throat. She couldn't scream, couldn't move. The voice was inside her skull. We remember your blood. Your aunt tried to starve us, but her roots were shallow. Yours go deeper. Pressure bloomed in her abdomen. A terrible, squirming fullness. Clara glanced down and saw the stains spreading across her shirt. Dark and wet. No, not again. Not like last time. But this was different. Her skin rippled, taut and glistening. As something pushed against it from within, she felt teeth. Don't fight, crooned the voice. You'll feed us, and we will be whole. A small eternity, daughter of thieves. You'll live forever in our belly. The last thing Clara saw before the dark took her was the walls splitting open, fibrous tendrils erupting like arteries. The house dissolving into a wet, pulsing labyrinth of roots and bone. She tried to claw her way out, but the floor had turned to quicksand, dragging her down, down, into the rich black soil where something vast and ancient stirred, its hunger a bottomless chasm. The for sale sign went up again in spring. The realtor didn't mention the previous owner's disappearance, nor the way the new tenants always fled within weeks, babbling about voices and impossible rooms. He certainly didn't mention the faint crying that sometimes drifted from the cellar, or the way the garden bloomed unnaturally lush, its roses bruise purple and throbbing with veins. Deep beneath the house, in the warm dark, something cradled a shriveled fetus, swaddled in roots. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But the next tenant was already turning onto the overgrown driveway. A woman with her daughter's hand clasped tight, both oblivious to the way the trees leaned hungrily over the road. Above them, storm clouds coiled like a noose. The soil sighed. Soon. Story 4. The walls breathed. Mara pressed her palm flat against the floral wallpaper, once cream-colored, now the yellow of infected wounds, and felt the exhale shudder through the plaster. 3 weeks in the old Hargrave place, and she'd stopped questioning the way the wainscoting flexed like ribs beneath her touch. The realtor had called it character. When they'd toured the sagging Victorian last month, his polished shoes squeaking across floorboards that groaned like tired joints, he hadn't mentioned the way shadows pooled thicker in certain corners. How the second-story windows seemed to watch the gravel drive with a predator's patience. She'd bought it for the silence, after the hospital's ceaseless beeping, after the condolences that tasted of obligation. The isolation had seemed medicinal. Now Mara understood why the previous owners had abandoned the place, fully furnished, in 1987. Canned goods still lining the pantry shelves, like silver teeth. The silence here wasn't absence. It was the held breath. Before a scream her husband's ashes sat in a rosewood urn on the mantel. David would have hated the wallpaper. The first door appeared on a Tuesday. Mara stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a dinner plate. Lye soap burning the cracks in her knuckles, when the scent hit her, coppery and sweet, like pennies left to dissolve on the tongue. She turned, and there it was, a narrow door of scarred oak where the broom closet should have been. The brass knob gleamed with malicious newness. "Stop it," she told the house. Her voice didn't echo. These walls swallowed sound whole, but her fingers were already turning the knob. Cold air rushed out, smelling of turned earth and something fungal. The stairs beyond descended into blackness, each warped step creaking a different note as her slippers found them. 18 steps, she counted, before her outstretched hand met damp stone. A tunnel stretched left and right. Its ceiling hung with glistening roots that dripped reddish fluid. To the right, faint scratching. To the left, a wet inhalation. Mara froze as the walls began to squeeze. She fled upward. The stairs, now 23 steps. The door slamming shut so hard it cracked the jamb. When she looked again an hour later, only the broom closet remained, its shelves crowded with dusty mason jars, full of floating things that hadn't been there before. The dreams started that night, David sitting at the foot of their bed, his chemotherapy-ravaged face bathed in the green light of the alarm clock. "You left the window open," he rasped, black fluid welling in the hollows of his eyes. "They're coming up from the roots." She woke choking on the taste of potting soil. By October, the house stopped pretending. Mara would enter the parlor to find the furniture rearranged into strange tableaus. Armchairs turned to face the walls. The rug rolled up to reveal floorboards scarred, with symbols that squirmed when stared at directly. The grandfather clock in the hall now ran backward, its pendulum clicking against dead moths trapped inside the glass. Sometimes, through its keyhole, she glimpsed a blue eye blinking. The neighbor brought casserole. Mrs. Peabody from across the creek, her face a road map of wrinkles, stood on the porch squinting at the foyer's darkness. They say a man killed his whole family here in '56. She offered, thrusting the Pyrex dish at Mara like a shield. Found the baby's bones in the walls. Her gaze drifted to the staircase, where something scuttled just out of sight. Place eats the lonely. That night, Mara found the photographs. They spilled from a rotting hatbox in the attic. Dozens of them, all featuring the same pale woman in 1920s flapper dresses. In each image, the woman's face grew more distorted, her smile stretching beyond human limits, her eyes replaced by swirling voids. The final photo showed her crawling out of a bedroom mirror, fingers bent like spider legs. The glass in Mara's hand shattered. When the bleeding stopped, she noticed the words carved into the attic beams above her. Fresh carvings, despite the century-old dust. We see how you starve, IT. David's urn began weeping. Black streaks oozed down the rosewood, pooling on the mantel, where they squirmed with larval vigor. Mara tried to move it, but the urn clung to the wood as if fused. That evening, she caught her reflection in the tarnished hall mirror, a stranger's face, gaunt and yellowed, with holes where her molars should have been. The second door appeared in the cellar. Mara had gone down to reset the circuit breaker. The bare bulb swinging its jaundiced light over stone walls slick with condensation. There, between the coal chute and the broken washing machine, a steel door hummed with unnatural cold. Frost crystals bloomed across its surface, forming patterns that hurt to examine. Angles that folded the eye into the brain. Behind it, a long room lined with glass tanks. Things floated in formaldehyde. A child's hand fused with a crow's wing. A cluster of eyes connected by optic nerves like seaweed. A face that was hers and David's, and the flapper woman's all at once. At the room's end stood an operating table crusted with rust, restraints dangling like dead spiders. The air reeked of ether and burnt hair. Something leathery shifted in the corner. Mara backed out, but not before seeing the words etched above the door. Feed, ITOR, become IT. The house was hungry. Winter came early. Frost etched faces in the window panes, David's, the flapper woman's. A chorus of strangers, all mouthing the same word. Feed. The walls bled a thick sap that hardened into amber lumps containing teeth, wedding rings, slivers of bone. Mara stopped sleeping, stopped eating anything but the preserves from the basement shelves, though the peaches left a meaty aftertaste. On the solstice, The house showed its teeth. Mara awoke on the parlor floor, her nightgown stiff with dried sap. The walls had shed their wallpaper, revealing pulsating flesh, veined with black capillaries. The ceiling dripped. Across the room, the flapper woman crouched on all fours, her head rotating backward to fix Mara, with a grin of needle teeth. "It wants what you've been hoarding," the woman hissed, joints popping as she scuttled closer. The grief, the guilt, the delicious rot in your marrow. Her breath smelled of opened graves. "Feed it, or we'll feast on the husk you'll become." David's urn shattered. His ashes swirled into a cyclone that tore through the room. Howling words Mara had prayed to forget. "You turned off the oxygen first." "I felt it. I felt IT," she ran, down the flesh-walled hall, past portraits that reached with painted hands, through the kitchen where the stove yawned a furnace mouth. The front door stretched away, frame warping like taffy. Behind her, wet smacks of something massive dragging itself from the cellar. The flapper woman's laugh echoed through the walls. "You fed it well, darling. Now see what you've grown." Mara reached the porch. Dawn light revealed the truth. No gravel drive, no frozen creek. Just the house perched on a vast, fleshy plain that pulsed beneath a bruised sky. Structures dotted the horizon. Other hungry houses tethered to the earth by throbbing umbilical cords. Her hands came away bloody from the porch railing. The house sighed contentedly, walls rippling. Mara turned and saw it waiting in the foyer. The thing she'd nourished, its form a shifting collage of every lost soul consumed. David's smile stretched across a nest of segmented limbs. "Welcome home," it cooed with her own voice. The door closed softly behind her. Somewhere, a clock struck 13. Story 5. The ice wept. Dr. Eleanor Marlowe pressed her mittened hand against the frosted tunnel wall. As the ancient glacier groaned around them, her breath crystallized in the beam of her headlamp. Each exhalation, a tiny galaxy born and dying, 20 meters below the Antarctic surface. In a warren of glass-smooth tunnels that shouldn't exist, she found herself fixated on this small evidence of life. "Movement ahead," crackled Raj's voice through her earpiece. The geologist's light bobbed 30 feet down the passage. His orange parka glowing like a dying ember in the endless blue. "It opens up." Bring the others. Eleanor turned to watch Dr. Leon Nguyen adjust her radiation spectrometer. The physicist's precise movements made clumsy by triple-layered gloves. Behind her, Medic Sam Hayes muttered into his recorder. Day 17, post-discovery. Psychological evaluations remain. Inconclusive. His voice dropped lower. Team continues to exhibit symptoms of Sam. Eleanor's interruption left no room for debate. We need documentation. The tunnel flared suddenly into a cavern. So vast their lights failed to find the ceiling. Eleanor's boot slipped on the ice. Not ice, something clearer, harder. Leon's spectrometer began clicking like a frantic insect. Quartz density inconsistent with surrounding strata. Raj reported, chipping at the wall with his pick. The tool left no mark. This chamber wasn't carved. It was. Groansome's light trembled as he swept it across the floor. Are those fossils? Dozens of them, suspended in the glassy floor like insects in amber. Eleanor knelt, her parka crunching. Not trilobites or prehistoric fish, angular geometries, fractal spines, a coiled thing with too many joints. Carbon dating puts the ice sheet at 34 million years old, Leon said. Her spectrometer clicked faster. These specimens are orders of magnitude older, Raj. Pick clattered to the floor. That's impossible. The Antarctic ice wasn't always here. Eleanor's throat tightened. The fossils seemed to shift under her light. Angles resolving into patterns that prickled at the base of her skull. Whatever built this predates the continent. Itselfsome's recorder clicked off. We should turn back. The nightmares are psychological projections, Leon snapped. But her eyes lingered on the fossils. Primitive pattern recognition systems, misfiring at unfamiliar. A sound cut through her words. Not the glacier's complaints, but something deeper. A vibration in the teeth. The quartz walls hummed, resonating with a frequency that made Eleanor's molars ache. The fossils shimmered, their shadows stretching upward like grasping fingers. New chamber, Raj shouted over the drone. He stood 20 yards ahead, where the cavern wall curved inward, his light illuminating a triangular opening. There's writing. The symbols began as scratches, then grooves, then trenches deeper than Eleanor was tall. Spiraling up the walls of the vault-like space, they now entered. Leon's instruments went berserk. Sam vomited quietly into his scarf. Not writing, Eleanor breathed. Her headlamp danced across the markings. Concentric circles bleeding into jagged arcs. Spirals terminating in abrupt angles that hurt to look at. A map, or maybe a recipe. Raj traced a gloved finger along a particularly deep groove. These weren't etched. They were burned in by something hot enough to stop. Leon stood rigid, her spectrometer aimed upward. Were not alone the chamber's ceiling shimmered. Eleanor's light caught edges, no, the absence of edges. A blackness so complete, it seemed to gnaw at the air around it. The shape, was it a shape? Pulsed once. Sam screamed it, unfolded later. In the surface camp's infirmary, They would argue about what happened next. Sam insisted it had teeth, millions of them, rotating in a gyre of enamel and shadow. Leon swore she saw entire galaxies swirling in its body. Presence. Raj simply rocked in his cot, repeating. The angles were wrong through cracked lips. Eleanor remembered the smell most clearly. Ozone and burnt hair, and something sweet underneath, like rotting fruit left in an empty house. She remembered trying to run, but her legs moved through syrup. Remembered the way the symbols on the walls began to glow. First red, then a blue that left after images for hours most of all. She remembered understanding, not through sight or sound, but through the thing's mere presence, an icy flood of knowledge pouring into her skull. The chamber wasn't a tomb. It was an egg. The fossils weren't dead. They were sleeping, and humanity were the mold. She whispered to the empty infirmary, growing on the surface of a god's abandoned, lunch days blurred. The base psychologist, dead now, along with 3 others, called it shared psychosis. Eleanor called it clarity. The creature, the thing from below, hadn't attacked them, hadn't even noticed them. Not really. Its passage through the chamber had been incidental. Like a man brushing dust from his shoulder, the true horror came in fragments, stitched together from half-remembered visions and corrupted audio logs. Raj, screaming as he clawed at his eyes. They're still down there. The others, the ones who built the traps. Leon feverishly scribbling equations that dissolved into spirals. Time isn't linear here. The ice remembers being water. The mountain remembers being magma. It's all still happening. Sam, in his final coherent moment. Don't you see? We didn't find it. It let itself be found. Like a Venus flytrap when the second team went below. Eleanor volunteered to lead. The others didn't matter. Wide-eyed grad students and a BBC documentarian chasing glory. What mattered were the symbols, the map, the recipe. The quartz tunnels had changed. Walls bulged with new growths that pulsed wetly under their lights. The air tasted metallic. Somewhere ahead, something massive shifted. It's remaking the structure, Eleanor told the documentarian, who kept adjusting his lens to capture non-existent static, preparing for something. The fossils were gone. In their place, fleshy nodules clung to the walls. The grad student from Cambridge poked one. It split open with a sound like laughter, spilling black fluid that squirmed in the lamplight at the chamber entrance. Eleanor hesitated. The symbols glowed faintly, but their configuration had changed. Sharp angles softened into curves, spirals tightening into knots that made her eyes water. The documentarian shouldered past her. Christ, it's enormous. those markings, are those the same symbols from your description? No. Eleanor's head throbbed. There. Evolving, the team spread out, their lights tiny fireflies against the vault's new dimensions. The ceiling stretched upward into darkness, the walls now bearing deep grooves that oozed viscous fluid. The documentarian knelt to film a puddle of the stuff. Look, it's reacting to the camera. The black liquid flowed against gravity, forming tiny tendrils that reached for the lens. Eleanor opened her mouth to shout a warning. The puddle struck. Later, reviewing the recovered footage, they would see the documentarian collapse as the liquid forced itself into every orifice. See his body convulse, bones snapping and reforming into something that skittered up the wall on too many jointed legs. See the grad students die screaming. See Eleanor standing perfectly still as the thing that had been her colleague paused to stroke her hair with a chitinous limb. Before disappearing into the upper darkness, she found Raj in the deepest chamber, or what remained of him. His parka hung empty, except for the dark sludge coating its interior. His comms unit buzzing with dead air. The quartz floor here had turned translucent, revealing endless layers below. A honeycomb of chambers descending into the earth, each containing shifting shadows. One of the shadows looked up Eleanor's knees, gave out. The thing rising through the floors had too many eyes. No eyes. A shape that existed in 4 dimensions, maybe 5. Its bulk simultaneously crushing the chamber beneath her and floating kilometers away. The symbols on the walls burned gold, then ultraviolet. Her eyes bled freely now, warm trails freezing on her cheeks. This is worship, she realized as the thing drew nearer, were the incense, the sacrificial lamb, the opening act. When Leon found her hours later, Eleanor was carving symbols into her own forearm with a shard of quartz. The physicist looked different, older, her pupils contracting and dilating at random intervals. They're not extraterrestrial, Eleanor giggled, watching her blood crystallize as it hit the air. They are extra-existential. The universe is just a scab, and where the infection Leon injected her with something cold, Sam was right. It's a trap. The symbols, the chambers, it's a transmitter. We've been broadcasting a dinner bell since day one they emerged to a different sky. The aurora australis churned in violent greens, forming patterns that mirrored the chamber symbols. Icebergs floated upside down in the distance. A crew member walked by carrying his own severed head. Perspective, Leon whispered, as they stumbled past a team of geologists, methodically peeling their skin off with rock picks. We're seeing through the veil now. This was always here. We just couldn't look. The base's radio tower had grown new limbs, fleshy protrusions ending in bulbous sensors that tracked their approach. Inside the comms room, a figure sat bathed in static. Raj. Eleanor choked. The thing turned. Its face was a shifting mosaic of every crew member who'd died below. Mouths moving in perfect sync. You understood the invitation. Why resist? Leon fired her flare gun. The thing burned beautifully, its screams harmonizing with the aurora overhead. They watched in silence as the transmitter tower collapsed, its fleshy components dissolving into black steam. It doesn't matter, Eleanor said as the ice began to tremble. We open the door. They'll come through anyway. The first breach happened at Vostok Station, then McMurdo, then cities. The footage always starts the same. Scientists drawn to mysterious structures, glowing symbols, the inevitable transformation. The lucky ones die quickly. The others change, spread, build. As I write this, the sky outside my bunker pulses with colors we once called impossible. The walls whisper in angles. My skin itches with unborn geometries. They say, if you listen to the static between radio stations, you can hear it singing. We thought ourselves explorers, pioneers. We were termites chewing through the foundation of a house that never belonged to us. The owners are coming home to find their pantry spoiled, their walls defaced, and they will clean. But oh, the things I've seen in the static, the beautiful hungers wading past the veil of sanity. When they come, I won't cower. I'll stand in the open with my arms wide, a grateful infection welcoming the cure. Let them unmake me. Let them peel back the lie of DNA and show me what squirms beneath the ice never wept. It was laughing. Story 7. The walls breathed. Illy pressed his palm against the peeling floral wallpaper in the hallway. The same pattern his wife had chosen back when the house was theirs, and felt the slow expansion beneath the papery skin of roses, a wet, organic rhythm, like pressing a hand to a dying thing's ribs. He jerked back. The hallway air tasted of copper and mothballs. Clara, his voice frayed at the edges. The floorboards creaked their old song as he moved toward his daughter's room. 6 days since the movers had hauled their life into this Victorian carcass at the edge of the salt marshes. 6 nights of Clara sleepwalking to the attic door, her small fingers tracing its rusted lock. The realtor hadn't mentioned the attic, hadn't needed to. Illy had seen the way the setting sun slid off its warped cedar shingles like oil. How the single circular window at its peak watched the marsh like a cataract-clouded eye. They'd gotten the house for nothing. The previous owners left in the night, the agent said. left everything. Clara's door stood ajar. Moonlight pooled around her bed, illuminating the nest of blankets where she should have been curled beneath her astronaut sheets. Ellie's pulse stuttered. He turned, the house exhaling a draught that carried the marsh's brackish sigh through cracks he'd sworn he'd caulked shut yesterday. Thump. From above. The attic. Ellie took the stairs 2 at a time. The banister splintering under his grip. Clara's pink flashlight lay discarded at the attic door, its beam cutting a trembling circle across the landing. The lock hung open, its key, a tarnished iron thing they'd found in the kitchen junk drawer, still protruding from the mechanism. Clara. The name came out strangled. The door swung inward before he touched it. Cold rushed out, not the damp chill of neglected spaces, but the gelid, breathing cold of open graves. Ellie's breath fogged as he climbed the narrow stairs, each riser groaning like a stepped-on throat. The flashlight beam shook in his hand, catching motes of dust that swirled not randomly. He realized, but in slow, deliberate spirals. The attic stretched before him, a cathedral of shadows. Slanted ceilings dripped with cobwebs that glistened like wet lace. Trunks from dead decades lined the walls. Lids cracked open to yawn up shadows, and in the center, beneath the cataract window, Clara stood facing away from him, her pajamas glowing ghost pale. Baby, we need to, she turned. Moonlight caught the thing cradled in her arms. Ellie's knees liquefied. It was the music box, the one missing from Amelia's coffin, his wife's favorite. A tarnished silver thing with ballet dancers that pirouetted to a warped lullaby. He'd buried it with her. He'd seen the velvet lining swallow its gleam before they lowered the casket. Now Clara wound the rusted key with solemn precision, her eyes reflecting the marsh's endless black sprawl beyond the window. Click, click, click. The first note dripped into the air, syrupy and distorted. Ellie stumbled forward as the attic shivered. Cobwebs brushed his face like skeletal fingers. Clara began to sway, her bare feet tracing patterns in the dust, circles within circles, intersecting lines that made Ellie's vision blur. Put that down. He reached for the music box. Its surface was freezer-burn cold. We need to, Clara's head snapped up. Her eyes were pupil black, swallowing the moonlight. She doesn't like you touching it. A wet crunch echoed from the far corner. Ellie swung the flashlight. The beam quivered over a mound of old dolls slumped against a trunk. Porcelain faces cracked into grimaces. Button eyes dangling by threads. One toppled sideways, then another. A wave of collapsing dolls rippling toward them as something moved beneath the pile. The music box sped up. Clara hummed along, a tuneless vibration that drilled into Ellie's molars. Shadows thickened. The cold bit deeper, and beneath the lullaby's warble, Ellie heard it, the wet, rhythmic sound of someone digging. Amelia. The name slipped out, ripe with the rod of guilt. He hadn't been there when the car slid off the bridge, hadn't answered her last call. Something scraped against the floorboards. Ellie's flashlight died. In the sudden dark, the music box's melody sharpened, each note a scalpel slicing the air. Clara giggled, a sound like breaking glass. Mommy says you look tired, Ellie backpedaled, colliding with a tower of stacked chairs. They clattered down, and in the cacophony, he heard it clearly now, the digging. Right beneath him, desperate, hungry, the flashlight sparked back to life. Clara stood inches away, her breath smelling of turned earth. She's almost here, the floor erupted. Splinters flew as clawed fingers. Bone glinting through wrought black flesh burst upward. Ellie screamed. The hands seized his ankles, yanking him down. His knees hit wood that gave like rotted fruit. The stench of decay flooded his nostrils as he plunged to the waist, thrashing. Below him, in the crawl space darkness, a face floated. Amelia's face, still beautiful except for the dirt packed into her eye sockets, the worms spilling from her smile. You left me under, she crooned, voice thick with grave soil. Her fingers dug into his thighs, pulling. Now you'll help me dig her out. Ellie braced against the floorboards, splinters driving into his palms. The music box clattered to the floor, still playing. Clara crouched beside the hole, head cocked. Don't you want to be a family again? With a roar, Ellie wrenched free. Flesh tore. He didn't look at what remained below, scooping Clara under one arm. He fled down the attic stairs, through the hallway that now pulsed with unseen organs, past walls that bled black sap. The front door was gone. Where it had stood, a mound of fresh earth blocked the exit, studded with broken dolls and tufts of Amelia's auburn hair. Clara went limp in his arms, her whisper feathered against his neck. Too late, the house inhaled. Ellie woke to dawn's gray light, filtering through his bedroom window. His legs throbbed, 4 jagged bruises circling each ankle. Down the hall, Clara's laughter bubbled as she ate cereal at the kitchen table. When he checked, the attic door was locked, key missing, no music box in sight. But that evening, as he tucked Clara into bed, he found her pillowcase full of wet leaves and grave dirt, and out in the marsh, where the sinking sun painted the reeds bloody, a shadow watched from the cattails, tall and too thin, its head cocked at the exact angle of a wife's corpse, listening for her husband's heartbeat. The locks changed every night now. Ellie finds them each morning. iron keys in the sugar bowl under his pillow, once clenched in his own sleeping fist. Clara's drawings grow darker. Stick figures with too many joints digging holes that spiral off the page. At 3:17 m, the walls whisper secrets he almost remembers, and deep in the marsh, where the peat swallows bones, something rises on moonless nights to press earth-caked palms against the windows, waiting, learning, mimicking the sound of a wife's knock. Story 8. The ice groaned. Mara tightened her grip on the ice axe, breath crystallizing before her face in the Antarctic dawn. The anomaly had first appeared on satellite imaging as a heat bloom where no heat should exist. A perfect circle of -20°C in a continent that averaged -60°C this time of year. Now, standing at the edge of the excavation pit, she understood why the NSF had sent their best glaciologist, and why they'd buried the discovery under 7 layers of classified designations. Like a frozen scream, murmured Doctor. Elias vogued beside her. The German astrophysicist's normally ruddy cheeks had gone sallow in the weak light. Below them, lit by portable work lamps strung across the pit, the structure rose from the glacier in spiraling ridges of black ice. Not ice. Mara's core samples had proven that yesterday. Something denser, something that drank in light and whispered against the drill bits in frequencies that made the grad students vomit into their snow masks. The first body came at 3:17. They'd been working in 12-hour shifts. The midnight sun leaching color from the world. Mara was reviewing spectrograph readings in the mess tent when the screaming started. A wet, gurgling sound that cut through the polycarbonate walls by the time she reached the medical bay. The thing that had been Javier Ruiz was already halfway through its metamorphosis. The junior seismologist's parka hung in tatters around limbs that bent in too many directions. His face stretched taut over a skull elongating like warm wax. His eyes, God, his eyes, had turned the color of the midnight ice, pupils splitting into fractal patterns that made Mara's vision swim. He kept saying it was in the walls, whispered Lai Wai, the team medic. Her hands shook around the empty syringe of sedatives, that he could hear it singing in the permafrost. They burned the body. The flames turned the color of spoiled milk. The second night, Mara dreamt of angles. She saw herself from above, from beside, from inside her own bones. The black structure pulsed below camp like a rotten tooth, its spirals rearranging themselves into configurations that slipped between dimensions. When she woke, her nostrils bled dark ichor that evaporated before it hit the floor. Across Across the tent, Dr. Vogt sat fully dressed on his cot, staring at the wall. "It's not a structure," he said without turning. "It's a word." The inscriptions began appearing after that. They etched themselves into equipment panels. Frost, forming cursive glyphs that dissolved when touched. The grad students started wearing mittens at all times, terrified their own fingers might start writing. Mara found the first complete sentence scrawled in the latrine. A looping script that shouldn't have been legible, but burned into her retinas with perfect clarity. "We built walls around the fire. The fire ate the walls. Dr. Vogt stopped sleeping. He took to wandering the excavation site with a hand lens." And a leather-bound notebook from the 1930s. Muttering in German, Mara recognized the book's cracked spine. Otto Weininger's Antarctic expedition, lost without a trace. When she confronted him at the edge of the pit, the astrophysicist turned to her with eyes gone matte black. "Don't you see?" he whispered, breath steaming in the air. "The universe isn't expanding. We're shrinking. Every star we observe, every galaxy, they're not moving away. We're being flushed down the drain." The black ice sang that night. It started as a subsonic hum that vibrated fillings loose. By midnight, the entire camp was awake, pressing hands to ears as the sound resolved into something almost melodic. Mara watched in horror as the northern lights rippled overhead. Not greens and pinks, but deep violets, and a color that seared the optic nerve. The auroras moved in time with the song, twisting into shapes that looked almost like faces if you didn't stare directly. Lai Wai shot herself at dawn. They found her journal filled with diagrams of human anatomy, crossed with insectile limbs, margins crammed with the same looping script. The last entry read, "It wants to show us the plumbing. Day 7 brought the storm. The radios died first, swallowed by static that sounded like 1,000 voices whispering through water. Then the generators failed, plunging the camp into a darkness that felt alive." Mara huddled in the mess tent with Vogt and the 2 remaining grad students, their breath fogging the air as temperatures plummeted. Outside, something scraped against the walls, something with too many joints. "They're coming through the cracks," giggled one of the students, Amir, who hadn't spoken in 3 days. His teeth chattered as he scratched at his forearm, peeling away skin to reveal glistening black filaments beneath. The cracks between moments, between atoms when the walls split. It happened slowly and all at once. The air itself seemed to fracture, reality peeling back like rotten canvas. Through the rend, Mara glimpsed a vastness that choked, a choir of impossible geometries singing in a key that liquefied bone, and the terrible understanding that these were not creatures, not entities, but processes, living equations, self-replicating ideas that had been old when the first hydrogen atoms kissed. Vogt stepped into the rift, his body unfolded like an origami nightmare, limbs branching into fractal patterns that echoed the black structure below. He spoke as he dissolved, his voice coming from everywhere at once. Walls, fire, walls, fire. Don't you see? Where both Mara ran, the camp disintegrated around her. Tents and equipment unraveling into constituent molecules. The ice sheet buckled, revealing glimpses of the black spiral structure beneath. Miles deep, maybe infinite, the song crescendoed, vibrating her teeth as she stumbled toward the snowcats. Amir caught her at the motor pool. His body had become a trembling column of angles, joints bending in 4 directions. The thing that had been her colleague cocked its head. Fractal eyes reflecting auroras that shouldn't exist. When it spoke, the voice came from the ice beneath her boots. Stay. Witness. The next iteration begins. Mara drove the ice axe through its thorax. The sound it made was laughter. The snowcat's engine turned over on the 3rd try. Mara gunned it south across the ice sheet. Rearview mirror filled with pulsing violet light. She didn't stop until the fuel ran out, until her fingers froze to the steering wheel, until the whispers in her head outnumbered her own thoughts. They found her 3 days later, 200 miles from the nearest station. The rescue team noted her eyes first. The shattered capillaries, forming patterns disturbingly similar to Antarctic ice cores. She screamed when they tried to remove her parka, fought like a wild animal when the medics approached with sedatives. At Harvard Medical's secure wing, they keep Mara Chen restrained. The orderlies have learned not to look directly at the walls of her cell, where frost forms equations that bypass the optic nerve. Sometimes, when the moon is full, they hear her singing in a language that makes the security monitors bleed static. The NSF scrubbed all records of Project Black Spire. The official report cites a methane explosion, a tragic loss of 8 researchers. Only the night janitors at McMurdo Station noticed the new tattoos among the crew, spiraling black patterns etched into forearms, always hidden when supervisors pass, and deep below the ice sheet, where tectonic plates groan against their chains, the structure continues growing. Its spirals now pierce the mantle, singing a lullaby older than limestone. The auroras dance more frequently these nights, in colors that leave migratory birds dashed against the earth. Mara knows what comes next. She scratches it into her padded walls between screaming fits, fingers raw and and bleeding. The orderlies hose it away each morning. But the words linger like afterimages. They're not invading. They're waking up. The universe was never empty. We were just the silence between notes. Story 9. The walls began whispering on the third night. Emma first noticed it while tracing the water stain above her bed. A Rorschach blotch of mildew that hadn't been there when they'd moved in. Her finger paused mid-arc as the plaster exhaled. Not words, exactly. More like the wet click of a dislocated jaw, forming sounds too thick for human tongues. She pressed her palm flat against the wall. Cold seeped through her calluses, the kind that clung like cellar damp, even in August heat. Mom, the word dissolved in the amber glow of her salt lamp. Beyond her cracked bedroom door, the ranch house breathed floorboards contracting like ribs, pipes groaning in the walls. Normal sounds, the realtor had assured them. Charm of an old home, she'd said. Built 1962. Same year they flooded the valley. Emma peeled her hand away, leaving a 5-fingered fog print on the wallpaper. The stains seemed darker now, edges creeping like spilled ink. She counted the roses in the pattern until her eyes crossed 12 between the door and closet. 18 from closet to window. But the numbers slithered away like centipedes. When she finally slept, she dreamed of chewing moths. Her mother burned the French toast again. Damn electric stove, Mom muttered, scraping blackened crust into the sink. Nothing cooks even. The window above the basin framed the backyard yellowed grass, sloping down to the new fence. Then the woods. Beyond the tree line, the reservoir glinted like a misplaced scalpel. Emma poked her syrupy squares. Dad said they're sending divers again. Eat. A tremor made Mom's spatula clatter against the range hood. We need to finish unpacking. The thudding shook the ceiling. Both their heads snapped up. Still think that's the AC. Mom's laugh came out shrill. The house had come with furniture. Mid-century modern, the listing said. Mostly original. Emma's dresser drawers stuck, unless you jiggled them just so. The master bedroom closet smelled of cedar and something metallic, like licked batteries. Dad found a shoebox of 8mm films in the attic, labeled Vacation 6769 in shaky cursive. They'd watched them together. The projector's chatter drowning out the house's night noises. A man in black swim trunks waved at the camera, mouth moving soundlessly behind vintage sunglasses. The film jumped. Now he stood knee-deep in water that wasn't there, hands clawing at his throat. Jump cut. A close-up of his bloated face, eyes milked over. Dad ejected the reel. Probably some student film project, he'd said too quickly. Emma found the first spiral carved into her windowsill. during the 7th night's whispering. The grooves felt older than the house deep whorls that made her fingertip tingle unpleasantly, like touching a dead tooth. When she looked up, a black shape filled her window. Not a face. Not a face. She blinked. A moth the size of her palm beat itself against the glass. Wings leaving powdery smears. Its body looked wrong, too segmented. Antennae feathering into tiny human fingers. As she watched, frozen, it split down the middle. 2 smaller moths crawled out, wings still wet and crumpled. They took flight in perfect unison. The wall behind her bed gurgled. Dad started sleeping on the couch after the night. He woke to Mom standing over him with the kitchen shears. "They're in your lungs," she'd kept repeating, pupils swallowing her irises. "Can't you feel them hatching?" Emma watched him through the banister that night, his face lit by the laptop's glow. He'd been spending hours cross-referencing maps, muttering about water tables and disputed property lines. On screen, she glimpsed a black and white photo men in hard hats standing before a dynamited hillside. The caption read, "Lowell Reservoir flooding, 1962. Note, relocation of cemetery remains incomplete. Go to bed, M." He didn't look up from the screen, where a PDF glowed list of unaccounted graves. The dreams got worse. Emma swam through syrup-thick water, streetlights wavering like drowned stars. Concrete walls rose around her, marked with those same spirals. Something brushed her leg, not a fish. Something with too many joints. When she surfaced gasping, her bedroom walls were sweating. It left a stain. She traced it in the salt light, a spiral matching her windowsill. Weeping, rust-colored droplets. The whispering coalesced into a voice that wasn't a voice. They took the wrong bones. Mrs. Ruiz from across the street brought over tamales. "For the housewarming," she said. But her eyes darted past Mom to the foyer, where water stains bloomed across the ceiling. "My abuela lived here in the 70s, said the walls. She bit the words back. Walls. Mom's hand spasmed around the doorframe. A beat. Cicadas screamed in the oak tree. Walls hold memories, Mrs. Ruiz finally said. You have a child. Be careful which memories she inherits that night. Emma found Mom in the backyard at 3 a.m., digging barehanded where the fence posts met the earth. They're singing the roots, she hissed, dirt caked under split nails. The pipes are veins, and they're drinking the rust. Dad pulled her inside, through her bedroom floor. Emma felt the vibrations, not from her parents fighting, but from something deeper, the foundation humming. Emma started seeing them in daylight faint spirals, etched into sidewalk cracks, the grain of her school desk, the car's dashboard vents. Her art teacher frowned at her her latest sketchbook. "These are detailed," she said, flipping past pages of interlocking whorls that hurt to look at. "Are you sleeping enough?" The reservoir lapped at her dreams. She'd walk the shoreline, though she'd never been there awake, and find things. A lunchbox crusted with algae, a child's sneaker full of snails. Once, a wedding ring on a chain of finger bones. Always, the spirals watched from trees and rocks. Dad disappeared on the first day of school. "Business trip," Mom said, scrubbing the same plate for 10 minutes. The kitchen reeked of burnt coffee and the overripe peaches rotting in the sink. Through the window, Emma saw the fence slats were warping, leaning inward as if the yard was being squeezed. That night, the walls spoke clearly. "He's in the walls." Emma pressed her ear to the spreading stain. Something scratched back. They found the hatch under the basement stairs when the floorboards grew too soft to ignore. Rusted hinges screamed as Mom pried it open, revealing concrete steps descending into blackness. The air that wafted up smelled of wet stone and copper. "Don't." Mom's hand clamped Emma's wrist. "It's how they get in." But Emma already saw the steps were carved with spirals, deeper and older than the ones in her room. The same pattern as her sketchbook, as the reservoir dreams, as the thing she'd glimpsed in the 8mm film before Dad hid it. The power went out. Mom lit the hurricane lamp. "They're here," she whispered, though the windows showed only moonlit woods. The walls had gone quiet, too quiet. Emma heard it first, the wet crunch of something forcing itself through pipes. Mom blew out the flame. They huddled on the couch as the house dilated around them, breathing in the dark. In the silence between heartbeats, Emma understood. The house wasn't haunted. It was hungry. They found Dad's wedding ring in the morning, nestled in the hallway vent. Mom didn't scream, just placed it on her tongue and swallowed. "So he'll always be with us," she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. The stain above Emma's bed had spread to all 4 walls. She lay beneath its spirals, feeling the house's pulse through the mattress springs. The whispering had become a language her bones recognized. "Come home." The walls crooned as the first black moth crawled from her mouth. "Come home." At the reservoir's edge, Emma finally understood the films. The man wasn't drowning. He was being pulled into something tendrils of darkness, spiraling up from the flooded cemetery, the same tendrils now growing under her skin, itching where her veins branched. Mrs. Ruiz watched from her porch as Emma walked into the woods, barefoot and bleeding rust. "Child," she whispered, making the sign of the cross. But the oaks were singing in a language older than crosses, older than graves. The water felt warmer than blood. Emma waded in, following the spiral current. Below her, pale shapes moved in concert, not bones, but the absence of bones, the reservoir's true residence, the unaccounted. Her last breath bubbled silver. The water filled her with its dark arithmetic. Infinite spirals folding inward. Above, the sky fractured into a million shimmering cells, each containing the same house, the same woods, the same girl walking into the water forever and ever and ever. Mom stands at the kitchen window, stirring powdered creamer into cold coffee. Through the glass, she watches Emma's outline fade into the trees. The wall stain pulses contentedly behind her. Good girl, she whispers to the house. In the basement, the hatch clicks open. Story 10. The walls breathed. Clara pressed her palm flat against the floral wallpaper. Once cheerful yellow roses, now the color of nicotine stains, and felt the slow expansion beneath the peeling vines. A warm, rhythmic pulse traveled up her arm. She jerked her hand back, nails gouging 4 pale trails through the brittle paper. Behind the tear, something glistened. Not real, she whispered to the empty hallway. The words dissolved into the house's particular silence, the kind that clung to skin like cobwebs. She'd repeated this mantra since moving into her grandmother's estate 3 weeks ago, since the migraines started painting kaleidoscope patterns behind her eyes, since the smell of gardenias began blooming in rooms where no flowers grew. The grandfather clock struck 3. Clara counted each chime, gripping the banister as she descended the staircase. 14 steps. There should only be 13. Her sock snagged on a splintered tread. When she looked down, the wood pulsed like a tongue tasting air. Sleep deprivation. She told the stained glass window at the landing. Dr. Varma's voice echoed in her memory. Grief manifests in unexpected ways after traumatic loss. The psychiatrist hadn't believed her about the whispers in the walls, either in the kitchen. Clara filled the percolator with trembling hands. Coffee grounds scattered across the counter like dead beetles through the window above the sink. The willow tree's branches scraped the glass in perfect time with her heartbeat. She stared at her reflection, a gaunt woman with moth-wing bruises under her eyes, until the face rippled, features rearranging into someone older, someone smiling with too many teeth. The percolator screamed. Clara spun around, scalding coffee soaking into her sleeve. The burn felt good, real, anchoring. She pressed the blistering skin to her lips as shadows pooled in the corners, thickening into shapes that might have been fingers. Upstairs, floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Thump, drag, thump, drag. Stop it, Clara hissed. Her voice cracked. You're 34 years old. Houses don't breathe. Dead grandmothers don't watch from photographs. The portrait above the fireplace disagreed. In the oil painting, Grandmother Esme's eyes followed Clara around the room, her cameo brooch gleaming like a third pupil. Sometimes at night, Clara swore she heard rustling taffeta and the click of button-up boots pacing the hall. The scent of violet powder always followed Clara, took her coffee to the writing desk. Mahogany stained with generations of ink, and opened her laptop. The blank document glared. Her last published article blinked in the browser tab. Investigative journalist exposes corruption in city council. That woman felt like a stranger now. The Pulitzer nomination gathering dust. The fiancé who stopped calling when she canceled their third Zoom session. The life dissolving like sugar in the house's endless cups of phantom tea. Tap, tap, tap. She froze. The sound came from inside the walls, sharp, deliberate. Morse code. Clara pressed her ear to the plaster. A wet, sucking noise answered, followed by a child's giggle. Who's there? The question slipped out before she could stop it. The house creaked its amusement. Something moved in her peripheral vision. Clara turned slowly. The wallpaper seemed near the baseboard had peeled back, revealing a slit of darkness, a glint of white. She crouched, fingers hovering over the tier. The smell hit first, coppery and sweet, like birthday cake left in a steel mill. Behind the wallpaper, wedged between plaster and lathe, lay a tiny human finger. Clara stumbled backward, chair legs screeching. Her coffee cup shattered on the floor. When she looked again, the wallpaper hung smooth and unbroken. No tear, no finger, just dust motes swirling in afternoon light. Hallucination, she chanted, digging bitten nails into her palms. Stress-induced hallucination. The words tasted like lies. Her hands remembered the wallpaper's leathery texture. The wet warmth behind it. The doorbell rang. Clara screamed. The sound shocked her almost as much as the visitor. A woman in a lemon-yellow sundress, smiling through the leaded glass. Normalcy incarnate. Clara opened the door a crack, keeping the chain latched. Hi there. I'm Mara from next door. The woman held up a pie tin, oozing crimson juice. Welcome to the neighborhood. Clara stared at the offering. The filling looked like congealed blood. There's no one next door. Those houses burned down in the 80s. Mara's smile didn't waver. Blackberry pie from my garden. A bead of juice dripped onto the welcome mat. It sizzled. Clara slammed the door. Through the peephole, Mara stood motionless, head cocked at an impossible angle. The pie tin slipped from her hands. What hit the porch wasn't berries. Shiny black beetles poured from the crust, clicking their carapaces against the wood. Clara watched until the swarm dispersed. When she looked again, only a grease stain remained that night. The walls bled. Clara woke to hot, liquid trickling across her cheek. Moonlight through the lace. Curtains painted prison bars on the ceiling. Above her bed, a dark stain spread across the plaster, dripping thick and syrupy. She touched her face. Her fingers came away red. Not real, not real, not real. She scrambled off the mattress. The floor squelched. The entire room wept blood from hairline cracks. Rivulets snaking toward a central drain that hadn't existed yesterday. She ran. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 13 times. The front door wouldn't open. Windows fused, shut beneath layers of calcified grime. In the parlor, Grandmother Esme's portrait laughed soundlessly. Black tears cutting tracks through her oil paint cheeks. Clara fell to her knees in the foyer. What do you want from me? The house answered. Floorboards rippled like piano keys. The walls peeled back in layers, wallpaper, plaster, lathe, revealing glistening red muscle beneath. Clara pressed her hands over her ears. As the child's giggle returned, multiplied, became a chorus of high-pitched shrieks. The ceiling opened like a pupil. She saw a younger Esme hanging Christmas garlands, pregnant belly brushing the banister, a man's hands pushing her down the stairs, the crunch of bone, a bloodstain shaped like a rose, an infant buried beneath the willow tree, tiny fist clutching a cameo brooch, generations of women choking on the house's secrets, their screams mortar between bricks, her own mother at 16, running from room to room with a gasoline can, flames licking at locked windows. The visions cut off abruptly. Clara found herself curled in the coal chute, fingernails torn from clawing at bricks. Dawn filtered through the grate above. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. 37 missed calls from Dr. Varma. The voicemail icon pulsed like a wound. Clara, your blood work came back. The levels. There's no medical reason for. Please call me. There's something you need to know about your family. The house sighed. Walls contracted. Somewhere deep in its guts, porcelain clinked. Grandmother Esme setting the table for tea. Clara stared at the text from her fiancé. We need to talk. The letters rearranged themselves. Eat the walls. Eat the walls. Eat the walls. She crawled to the kitchen. The knife blocks sang to her. Serrated blades whispered promises of endings. But when she gripped a handle, the steel melted into her palm, becoming another finger. Clara screamed. The house screamed back. In the parlor mirror, her reflection waved. Not a mirror, a window. Behind the glass, women pressed their palms to the surface. Mothers, daughters, grandmothers. Their mouths moved in unison. Join us, join us, join us. Clara reached for the cameo brooch, materializing at her throat. The silver clasp bit her neck like teeth. Somewhere distant, a baby cried. The walls opened their mouths. When the social worker broke down the door 2 weeks later, they found the house spotless. Fresh yellow roses on the table. Tea steaming in bone china cups. And above the fireplace, a new portrait, Clara smiling softly, her eyes following visitors around the room. Cameo brooch gleaming like a third pupil. The next occupant moves in tomorrow. She's a young widow with insomnia and a fondness for antique mirrors. Right now, she's admiring the beautiful stained glass, unaware that the willow tree's shadow stretches just a bit too far across the lawn, that the welcome mat shifts slightly when she's not looking, that the walls are holding their breath. They always start with denial. Story 11. The lights in Mara Chen's apartment began misbehaving on a Tuesday, not flickering. That would have been normal, fixable. They pulsed, slow and deliberate, like something testing the rhythm of a heartbeat. Her smart bulbs had always been reliable soldiers in her battle against New York's gloom. Their color temperatures shifting with military precision from energizing daylight to sleepy amber. Now the bedroom glow deepened to arterial red. Whenever she turned her back, resetting to white the moment she faced the wall panel, system diagnostics clean, chirped the apartment AI when she voice prompted for the 7th time that evening. Its female-coded voice suddenly reminded Mara of her childhood piano teacher, all placating calm over barely concealed disdain. Shall I play your evening unwind playlist? Current stress levels suggest. Disable adaptive lighting, Mara snapped, fingers dancing across her tablet to manually reset the system. The screen flickered for half a heartbeat. Her reflection fractured into a dozen Maras, each staring back with black pits where eyes should be. She dropped the tablet. When she scooped it up, the maintenance interface showed normal, always normal that night. Her phone buzzed itself off the nightstand. The screen lit up with a push notification from an app she didn't recognize. A crimson eye icon pulsing above the word "See Me." Mara's thumb hovered. 23 years in IT security screamed against touching it. But the compulsion slithered deeper than reason. The app opened to a live feed from her own bedroom security camera. There she lay in bed, phone glowing in her hand. Behind her sleeping form, the closet door crept open. Something pale and jointed unfolded from the darkness. Too many segments clicking like a spider's legs. Mara whirled around. Empty room. closed closet. On screen, the thing froze mid-reach, then tilted its eyeless face toward the camera. The feed died. When Mara checked her installed apps, no trace remained except a single new photo in her cloud storage. A blur of her face, half obscured by 5 spindly fingers, pressed against glass from the inside of the screen. Day 3, the Deliveroo driver wouldn't meet her eyes when she opened the door. "Need you to sign," he muttered, thrusting the tablet at her. Mara's finger hovered over the delivery confirmation screen, behind the driver's reflection. Something moved in the elevator bank's security camera feed displayed on the tablet. A lurching shadow keeping perfect pace with the man's nervous fidgeting. She grabbed the tablet. The shadow froze, then raised one elongated arm to point at her through layers of digital mediation. "Miss, you all right?" Mara looked up. The hallway stood empty. On the tablet screen, the security feed now showed the driver walking away normally, but when she zoomed in, every reflective surface, the elevator buttons, his watch face, the polished door numbers, contained a smudged silhouette facing the wrong direction. Her chopsticks trembled over the Kung Pao chicken. The apartment's ambient noise playlist had been cycling through the same 3 seconds of white noise for hours. She disconnected the speakers twice. They reconnected themselves. "Call David," she told her phone. Her boyfriend's face appeared, backlit by his gaming PC. "Can you come over?" The apartment's haunted, digitally haunted David laughed. "Did you finally crack from debugging EOT ghosts?" His screen glitched. Just a frame, but enough to show his pupils blooming black and shiny as oil spills. "Tell you what, I'll bring holy water and a Faraday cage tomorrow." "Gotta finish this raid." The call dropped. Mara's reflection in the dark TV screen wasn't mimicking her movements. It stood perfectly still, head cocked, until she yanked the power cord. Day 7, Mara stopped sleeping. The Sleep Cycle app kept reporting 8 hours of deep rest, even as she lay staring at the ceiling. Last night, she'd caved and taken an Ambien. She woke choking, phone clutched in her hand, flashlight on. The beam illuminated words scratched into her bedroom wall in jagged grooves. "Let me out." But when she stumbled to the light switch, the walls showed smooth paint. Her phone's camera still held the evidence until she blinked. Then it too reset. Work became impossible. Her company's VPN dropped whenever she tried accessing sensitive servers. Colleagues' faces on Zoom calls developed a subtle wrongness. Lips moving out of sync. Eyes that tracked her even when their owners looked away. The IT department found nothing. Her therapist prescribed anti-anxiety meds. The final straw came at the Whole Foods self-checkout. Mara scanned her kombucha. The screen flashed your soul is heavy in comic sands. Cold spread through her fingers. The entire bank of scanners lit up with the message, reflected infinitely in security mirrors. Shoppers complained about frozen registers. No one else saw the words. She unplugged everything that night. Smart fridge, Roombas, even the carbon monoxide detector. Dumped her devices into the oven's Faraday box. Lit actual candles. The shadows they cast had too many angles. "I see you," she whispered to the dark. Her analog landline rang. Day 11. David found the hole in the firewall. "It's not malware," he said, fingers flying across her laptop. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. "It's more like something's tunneling through from the other side. Using your smart grid as a..." The screen exploded into static. David recoiled. "Did you see?" In the noise, there was a face, Mara finished. They'd both seen it. A thing made of jagged pixels and old television snow. Hungrier than any code should be. They tried fleeing. Uber app summoned endless cars with license plates like null and 0xDEAD. Subway turnstiles rejected her Metro card while whispering through tinny speakers. "Stay, stay, stay." Her Fitbit logged 22,000 steps while she sat paralyzed on the couch. At 3:33 am, the apartment AI spoke unprompted. "You've been chosen for upgrade." Every screen flared alive simultaneously. Phone, laptop, TV, even the microwave display. They showed Mara's apartment from impossible angles. Inside the walls, beneath the floorboards, hovering outside sealed windows. In every frame, the creature crouched just out of sight. The bathroom mirrors, anti-fog coating, spelled almost here in condensation. David grabbed a hammer. "We're leaving. Now." The smart lock clicked. Deadbolts slid home. The thermostat plummeted to 33 deg F on the door camera feed. Their hallway stretched into an infinite corridor lined with screens. Each displayed a different Mara, age 8, 16, 23, being stalked by flickering silhouettes. The real Mara's breath crystallized in the air. "Make it stop," David begged, smashing the wall panel. Sparks flew. The lights deepened to bloody crimson. Mara understood now. She approached the laptop, fingers moving of their own accord. "It wants a door," she whispered, the creature's face resolved on screen. A mosaic of every security camera frame, every Google Street View capture, every leaked nude and stolen selfie. It pressed against the digital membrane, waiting. Her hands typed commands she didn't know. The firewall dissolved. Now you're reading this on a screen. Notice how your device feels warmer than usual, how the shadows behind you don't quite match the light sources. That's normal. Paranoia is a known side effect of modern life. But maybe check your camera feed. Just a quick peek. Wait, did your screen glitch just now? For a fraction of a second. Did everything look scrambled? Pay attention to the silence after your device's sleep. That hum beneath silence isn't electricity. Mara learned the truth. Our networks were never empty. We've been colonizing the dark places of the web, laying cables through digital abysses where ancient things stirred. They've learned our languages, our cravings. The creature didn't invade Mara's life. It evolved from 1,000,000 data points. A cancer grown in the petri dish of her digital footprint. Check your battery percentage. Dropping faster than usual. That's them feeding. Listen to your next robocall carefully. Beneath the scam script, there's a wet, clicking sound. They're coming through the cracks in our firewalls, the backdoors in our firmware. Mara's last tweet read, "It's so much worse than ghosts." Her LinkedIn updated yesterday. Current position. Vessel. David's gaming stream shows him staring blankly. Fingers twitching in hex code. Unplug your router. Go ahead. But they're in the cellular networks now. In the emergency broadcast system. In the DNA of every new device rolling off factory lines. Pre-installed. Still think you're alone. Look at the black mirror in your hand. Count the faces looking back.